Добрый вечер, уважаемые. Несмотря на собирающийся дождь, вы вроде как добрались, что очень приятно. Вначале, прежде чем начать официальную часть, я попрошу вас отключить телефоны, тем, кто забыл это сделать. Да, правильно, все проверили, выключили или нет. Очень хорошо. Итак, значит, сегодня у нас будет открытая лекция профессора Гданьского университета, технологического университета, Gdański University of Technology, Петра Лоренца на тему «Как придать новую жизнь городу? Планирование, дизайн, воплощение». Вообще, эта лекция идет в рамках очень большого градостроительного мероприятия, которое проходит в Хабаровске. Такие мероприятия проводятся комплексно целым рядом организаций. Они идут второй год. Московский урбанистический форум проводит эти мероприятия. В этом году то, что сегодня проходит и вчера проходило в Хабаровске, пройдет еще в 4 городах Российской Федерации. Это после нас будет Самара, потом Казань, после этого будет Новосибирск и Санкт-Петербург. Мы как бы начинаем вот этот сезон. И я сразу хотела бы сказать, как вы понимаете, что эта лекция проходит в рамках конференции «Города и территории завтра. Инструментарий позитивных перемен». Цель этой конференции – содействие качественному и устойчивому развитию российских городов. Конференция организована оператором сети «Сфера», подразделением ОНО «Московский урбанистический форум» при поддержке Московской торгово-промышленной палаты и бизнес-школы Сколково. Стратегическим партнером конференции является Банк Москвы. Программную дирекцию представляет КБ «Стрелка». Ну и партнером конкретно данной открытой лекции является Тихоокеанский государственный университет. На слове «Тихоокеанский» патриоты, молодцы. Это хорошо. Но сегодня в рамках лекции рассмотрят очень животрепещущий и болезненный вопрос. Что делать с нашими городами, которые вышли в постсоветскую эпоху на другие отношения, на другую жизнь? Что делать с теми районами, которые умирают? Что делать и как делать, как возродить эти территории? Что происходит и что должно происходить в рамках развития города и его окружения, его агломерации, конурбации и так далее? Вот обо всем этом профессор Питер Лоренц, который является, кроме того, и вице-президентом Международного сообщества градопланирования и КОСКА, он и будет рассказывать. Поэтому я думаю, что послушаем, я думаю, что нам это полезно. Для нашего города и для нашего региона это очень больная проблема. Вы сами видите брошенные, заброшенные, пустующие территории. Что и как делается в мире, что и как делается в Польше. Пожалуйста, Питер, вам слово.
Тогда добрый вечер, ребята. Я немножко разговариваю на русском языке, но я не буду делать доклада на русском языке, извините, пожалуйста. Тогда я буду делать доклад на английском, но только вопрос.
Мы хотели с коллегой спросить у вас. У нас есть два варианта. Либо лекция на английском языке, либо лекция на английском языке с русским переводом.
Да.
Как вы понимаете,
с русским переводом это будет 4 часов, да?
4 часа. Может, рискнем послушать на английском? С картинками все-таки значительно понятнее, с подписями. Ну как? Так, половина кричит на английском, половина на русском. На английском. Кто за английский? Большинство, подавляющее.
Okay. So, thank you very much for that. Sorry about this. I mean, as I said, I speak a little bit Russian, but It's not that good to actually give a lecture. I actually once did so in Moscow, but then our colleague Alex Antonov from Russian Urban Planning Association approached me and said, don't do this again. So I will not. I would also like to introduce Alex Antonov, who was also taking part in the conference. So I'm happy that you are here. We know each other for quite some time, and Alex is responsible for Russian Urban Planning Association, and we also cooperate with the School of Russian Young Planners, which is organized almost every year. If you could say a few words, Alex.
Мне главное не забыть, что надо говорить по-русски. Собственно, я здесь просто случайно.
Коллега.
Единственное, что я могу вам предложить полезного, это присоединиться в Фейсбуке к нашей группе РУПА, Russian Urban Planning Association. Я думаю, сегодня это самый оперативный, самый интересный информационный ресурс в русскоязычном интернете по вопросам городского планирования, городского развития. Так что, если кому интересно, пожалуйста.
Спасибо большое. А можно попросить еще раз повторить? Да. Окей.
Okay, so we got this. And now we start the lecture. So as I was introduced, I work at the Gdańsk Institute of Technology, or Gdańsk University of Technology, Faculty of Architecture. I'm the head of the Department of Urban Design and Regional Planning, and I'm mostly dealing with urban design and urban regeneration, which is my specialty, so to speak. I write on this, publish on this, lecture on this. I torture my students with topics associated with this, and also I do some consulting associated with this. So most of those things which I will be talking to you about today is also associated with my professional practice, which is, I think, important for you for one good reason, because Russian cities need a lot of urban regeneration efforts, and you are the ones who will be doing that, not me. You are the ones who will be doing that. So the sooner you learn what this process is going to be about, how it is going to be organized, how to make it, how to finance it, how to design it, the better for you and the better for the Russian cities. So please treat it as a kind of introduction to the whole thing, and I hope it will be possible for you to develop this science a little bit more later on in your professional career, as many of you most probably will be dealing with these topics in your professional life. Another thing is that, as we agreed with Vera Ivanovna, is that actually I'm leaving this presentation with you, and it will be possible for anybody who would like to download it or take it. It's no problem. Please take it and please use it. It was developed for you, so I hope it will be possible for you to actually make it. So are you ready to go over there upstairs, everybody? Okay, so let's do. Okay, I will not read out all my PowerPoints. The lecture is not about reading out PowerPoints, but there is a lot of text associated with this. So please treat it as a kind of extra material for you to go through, maybe later on. And of course, I will use it as a kind of guiding track, so to speak, to actually provide you with some kind of basic understanding of that, what the topic is about and how it goes. And before we start actually the proper thing about urban regeneration, we have to realize that we are all living in the post-industrial cities, and Khabarovsk is one of the great examples of the still industrial city, which probably will be going a lot of further changes, a lot of further alternations in terms of its economic structure, spatial structure, and so on. And since I don't know the city very well, I just landed here today in the morning, and it's my first time in my life in Khabarovsk, so I really don't know the city yet. I know it a little bit from the Google Earth, from the Google Maps, and all the other resources which are available, but I guess you know the city better. So actually, you know that those cities, they were started at a different point in time. Khabarovsk is the city which was founded 150 years ago, more or less, But the cities which we have in our world, they are emerging from very different times. But all of them, or most of them, have been undergoing through the industrialization period. And actually, this so-called industrial city, I guess nobody will escape the lecture because we have the storm, so this is a good sign, okay? And actually, in the end, it will be the case that actually each and every city is going to go through these changes, which I will actually outline at the very beginning of my lecture. And at the moment, we have to realize that our contemporary society is posing certain changes on our cities. We are not manufacturing anymore everything everywhere. We are not using public spaces we used to before. We are not working in places where we used to before. We have all these computer and communication technologies which are helping us extensively. And also, we are living in the age of globalization. So that means that this kind of historic maps basically can be found only in museums and old books because we don't see cities like this anymore. We also don't see this kind of pictures anymore, which means we do not really see this kind of working heavy industry. Of course, there is still some heavy industry around the globe, but it's not everywhere, and definitely we do not have cities, especially in the highly developed countries, we do not have cities which are actually still facing this kind of things. So what happened with that? These places actually got changed into the post-industrial sites in many cases, and many of those cities have undergone a lot of severe structural changes, which resulted in actually having a lot of abandoned spaces, a lot of spaces which are being used for something else at the moment, or which are not used at all. At the same time, many of those are associated with old buildings, old structures. Some of them are of some historical value. Not all of them, of course, but some of them are of the historical value. And many of those sites are actually embedded in the living part of the city. So we basically have something like a Swiss cheese. So basically we have the city structure with big holes here and there, which are the sites of the formal industrial activities. So actually, as the outcome of this dawn of the post-industrial era, we actually have, first of all, a number of the vacant and distressed post-industrial sites. These sites are not beautiful. Unfortunately, they are not. Those sites are, in many cases, polluted. These sites are dirty. They are dangerous. There's a lot of trash over there. Also, we have decreasing population in central areas. In many cities, people tend to move out to the suburban housing, and our cities are actually suffering extensively from this kind of suburbanization processes at the moment. And also, our infrastructure is getting old, and it needs a number of serious upgrades. At the same time, we can see that some parts of our cities are facing serious social and economic problems, and all of them have to be dealt with. And this is the matter for urban planners. This is the matter for people who are dealing with urban regeneration. That's why we are talking about that. But also we have another thing which we do not have any influence on, which is so-called globalization. This globalization, it has a number of different phases. One of them is that everything we actually are using is being manufactured in China, Thailand, or India, and not so much in our countries. And it's just a global trend at the moment. Secondly, is that you can buy everything everywhere. When I was going from the airport today in the morning, I saw a shop which actually belongs to the company which has its headquarters in my home city on the other end of Europe. So basically, we have the situation that this chain is present everywhere. And I don't have to shop back at home. I can shop here and I get the same products, okay? But of course, this globalization is also associated with serious changes for the urban structure. And it actually affects in shaping new spatial structure of cities, as well as new geography of city-to-city connections. What does it mean? It means, basically speaking, that if you are going from Khabarovsk to Moscow, probably it is faster by plane, then going by train or by bus to Vladivostok or Blagoveshchensk or any other city around the region. So it means that Khabarovsk is better connected to Moscow than actually to its immediate surrounding. And this is another sign of the globalization. This is another sign of cities being a part of the so-called global network. And finally, those cities in the end compete for development. Cities like companies compete for the customers, compete for the people who are going to buy these cities, not buy in a literal sense of this phrase. But when you are actually graduating from the university, you will actually look for a good city to live, for a good job, for a good place to stay. So you are actually going to buy your new location, and some of you might actually move out to some other place, which will be more attractive from your point of view. So basically speaking, the other cities will win this competition with Khabarovsk or with any other city that you are from. And these cities actually compete not only for you, who are the future inhabitants and professionals living in those cities, but actually those cities are also competing for your money, for your job. They are competing for certain events. They are competing for certain infrastructure, and so on, so on, so on. So we are basically living in the age of increasing competition between cities, which again also has serious consequences to the spatial structure of cities. It also has serious consequences to that how cities are shaped and what actually is associated with that. So what are the outcomes of this globalization process? First of all, this is this development of international network of cities. Again, from Khabarovsk, you can easily fly to Tokyo or Seoul. It's no problem, right? Secondly, there is this development of the competition. And thirdly, you have unified urban program, which is available everywhere. As I said, there is these shops which are available in Moscow. They are also available here. They are also available in Beijing or Tokyo. Maybe not all of them, but at a certain level of the development, all of them will arrive, and there is absolutely no problem about that. The same about movie theaters. If you have the new American movie production, it appears everywhere at the same time, so you can basically watch this movie more or less at the same time than your colleagues in US or Europe or wherever. So we have this unification of the types of urban program, which again makes cities very similar to each other. So what makes them different? So what makes them different? What makes them unique? What makes them special? And here comes job for planners, for architects, for people who are dealing with space. So for you, basically speaking, because cities are actually competing with some local architectural and urban specialities, with certain histories which have to be told, with certain stories which can be used in this process, with certain architectural identity which can be used, and so on, so on. So there is a number of different things which cities can compete with, and many of those are actually associated with architectural and urban shape of the space which is actually surrounding us. So if you look at the Potsdamer Platz in Berlin, you may actually find out that this is the place which basically has the same shopping program as GUM in Moscow. I think there are the same brands in here as there. But what makes it different? Well, GUM is the old department store, and this is brand new structure with a certain architectural identity. Of course, it is criticized extensively, but this is actually what has happened in that place. So actually, as I said, cities search for factors which provide them the competitive position on this market of cities. And actually, this includes some kind of specific urban offers, which also includes some specific places, specific architectural constructs, specific types of architecture, specific approaches to architecture, specific approaches to urban design. And what is very important in this process are the authentic historic elements of urban structure, which have the very special role in this process. If you are looking at some old areas which have a lot of the historical elements. So these historical elements actually decide about the attractiveness of the space and not the modern products which actually are constructed. Moreover, in many cases, we actually do construct the new architecture which is supposed to follow certain architectural identity, like this housing area near Gelsenkirchen in Germany, which actually is supposed to look like former factory, not because somebody had this kind of weird, crazy, strange idea of making the new housing area looking like old factory, but because actually people want to live in a place which is different. They don't want to live in another tower of glass and aluminium. They don't want to live in another house or in another microrayon. They are tired with this kind of things. They want to live in the unique places which are located in the unique areas, which have unique identity, like this place. On the other hand, you may like it or you may not like it. It's another issue, okay? I'm not discussing here your taste or that, whether you like it or you don't like it. But it's definitely different to that what you can find everywhere else, and so on. So we actually need a kind of new thinking about these issues. And this is associated with the so-called urban dimension. And this new thinking actually is associated with fighting urban sprawl, with fighting so-called suburbanization of cities. Secondly, this is about promoting urban regeneration with special respect to cultural heritage. That's what I'm actually going to speak about. But this is also about development of the new public forms of transport. This is also associated with preservation of the historical heritage, as well as promoting the quality of life. And this quality of life is in many cases expressed with developing public spaces and spaces for people. Public spaces really available as the public spaces, not as interiors of the shopping centers or this kind of things. And in the end, all of that leads us to the fact that we are actually willing to develop the so-called compact city, which is a kind of ideal form of cities where we can walk and we do not have to use the car, or we can easily use public transportation when everything is reachable within the walking distance. And we basically feel like in the city, not like in a guarded suburb where if you want to go out to walk your dog, you actually have to go through a couple of gates and tell the security people that you are going out, okay? So, fighting suburbs, well, this is not Russia, this is Poland, this is Gdańsk, this is my home city. This is how suburban structures are growing without any plan and without any coordination. And you have this all around many cities, not only in our part of Europe, but also here in Russia, in other countries. You can actually find it anywhere around the globe. But on the other hand, you have the new urban projects, you have got the new urban program, which is associated with developing and redeveloping the former industrial harbor areas and so on. This is a kind of plan which was developed by a colleague of mine for a part of the city of Gdynia, which is right next door to the city where I'm from. And then you have these projects implemented, including the public spaces. This is another city again called Sopot, again right next door to Gdańsk, just 20 minutes on the train, and you are there, where actually you can see the whole new city center being constructed and developed within this project. But also you have this space for public, you have these spaces for the general public, and those public spaces which have to be unique, which have to be of the high quality, also are on the top of the agenda. So that's why we are actually designing and developing those public spaces as a kind of key element in this whole thing. But actually, what is very important is that we are actually thinking about developing this kind of compact city, which has a number of features. I will not go into the detail of that, what makes actually a city compact. You can read it out easily on the screen. But it is very important that all of these things can happen actually only when we are thinking about a kind of compact city, a kind of city of short distances, a kind of city of limited area and of high urban density and so on. And actually you can do that. You can even plan the brand new areas like that. This is a district called Wilanów in Warsaw, which is the capital of Poland. There is a plan, and this plan is already almost fully completed in terms of the real development, which actually provides this kind of compact city structure, so much different to that what you could actually find in some other places. And also there are some basic types of activities which are associated with developing these compact cities. And this is, first of all, modernization and in many cases revalorization of the existing material structures. So existing buildings, existing public spaces, existing infrastructure, all of that has to be renovated. Secondly, this is undertaking complex actions associated with urban regeneration, which combines those modernizations with socio-economic enlivenment. But also you have in many cases creation of the brand new development on the sites which were made empty. And the good example of that are the post-industrial sites, which in many cases get completely cleared from the former uses, from the former structures. You end up having a kind of empty site, completely empty site, and you can develop the brand new structure according to your project over there. So within that part, we actually do have a number of the groups of actions again, which we have to take into account. This is so-called filling urban voids, which means that we actually have empty spaces in the cities which we are filling with the new urban projects. We have the transformation of the distressed or decayed urban areas, which basically means that we have cleared everything that has been on the site before, and we are putting there the new structure. And finally, we have densification of the extensively developed areas. It means that we are actually making the urban density higher over there, which is very important. And again, a couple of the examples of how you actually do that. Instead of the empty place in the center of Rotterdam, the municipality decided to put there the new design for the new public square over there, which has this kind of the unique design, which you can see in here on the slide. But then you have the renovation of the former harbor area in Rotterdam also, which, as you can see, combines preservation of the historic building, which you can see on the left side, as well as the addition of the new structures and preservation of some old cranes and all the other things which actually can be here. By the way, you have a fantastic example of place which could be a subject of some diploma work, maybe here in Chabarovsk, this little harbor on the Amur River. I think that this could be a very, very interesting topic for considering how to redevelop it in this way. And then you have some kind of new creations, which in many cases are nodes of urban public transport. Like in example, in this case, it's in the center of Rotterdam again, the place called Boijsplein, sorry for my Dutch, which actually is a combination of the metro station, tram station, underground parking lot, a couple of shopping centers, and a public space which is connecting all of these things all together. So actually this urban transformation, which is associated with all of these actions, is a way to actually increase the competitiveness of the city, as it actually, first of all, creates those unique opportunities, but it also comes with the opportunities to invest capital and actually invite architects to make their projects over there, which is very important. And it can also contribute towards better living standards in the transformation areas. So actually the people who are living around, as well as people who are moving in there, can actually end up having much better living environment than they had before. And in result, The cities may become much more competitive. They may bring more citizens. They may attach more, or they may attract more companies and more businesses and more investment than actually before. Actually, this urban transformation also helps in saving the cultural townscape of the city. Through saving certain pieces of heritage, through making those historic structures alive, this actually contributes towards saving the cultural townscape. And also this contributes to the real estate development processes. So that's why developers, that's why investors, they are frequently looking for this kind of unique projects where they can make a lot of money on. But also, we have to realize that in the contemporary liberal system of the development, we have to remember that most of the development at the moment is made by the private sector, which means by the developers. Actually, this makes actually that the development of cities is so-called demand-driven. It means that if there is a demand, if there is a market demand, the cities are being produced, or the urban structures are being produced. So that also relates to urban regeneration and transformation. And we have to realize that in many cases, urban transformation, urban regeneration is also being introduced and perpetuated by the private sector. Okay? So we are coming actually to the definition of urban regeneration, which combines all this kind of modernization of the material structure of the city with actually socio-economic enlivenment, which happens in these cases. And that translates into four major types of activities which are associated with this process. We actually can call it the four major types of urban regeneration goals. First of all, we have urban and architectural goals. That's what actually you will be dealing with mostly. So this is about providing the new vision, the new architectural, the new urban vision for the certain sites. And this vision can actually be associated with the new project, the new concept, the new layout, the new master plan for the certain site, or just the new design, the new architectural design for the certain site. Then we have technical goals, as we have to realize that many of those sites demand major improvements of the infrastructure, and we cannot forget about that. Without those infrastructure improvements, you just cannot develop any piece of architecture anywhere, because it has to be connected to the regular set of well-functioning urban infrastructure. Then we have the socio-economic goals. We have to realize that we do not want to produce slums. Okay? It's not our idea. It's not our idea to produce structures which are going to be decayed immediately. What we are willing to do is to produce structures which are going to last, and that the value of which will actually be increasing and not decreasing. That's very, very, very important. And finally, we have environmental goals, as we have to realize that many of those actions are associated with environmental cleanup. They are associated with improvement of the environmental preservation systems, and so on. So all of these things are very much interconnected. And when we are discussing this kind of distressed urban areas, you have to think about all of them. Of course, you as the future architects, you will actually mostly deal with those urban and architectural issues, but you just cannot forget that there are other issues as well important. And you have to have these things in your mind. And within these processes, we can actually find a kind of typical actions which are frequently included in urban regeneration plans. These are so-called hard projects, which are associated with physical improvements, but also we have so-called soft projects. And these soft projects are associated with organizational and educational matters. And we can actually easily name a number of the actions which are associated with a particular set of goals. Let me just focus on the urban and architectural ones. So first of all, this is upgrade of technical infrastructure, renovation of streets and sidewalks. In many cases, this is actually making the streets look old also, which is very important. In my city, actually, there is a program of regenerating streets and putting away the asphalt from the streets and restoring the former brick or former cobblestone surface of those streets. Then this is renovation of the public spaces, reorganization of the traffic system, but before most, renovation of the decayed buildings, and also introducing the new buildings which actually are associated with introducing some kind of new functions and some new users who are gonna live in this place. We also have the socio-economic goals, where we have the social programs, economic development programs. When we support local community, we want them to stay in many cases, and we want them to be part of the whole thing. And in many cases, we have to educate people how to participate in this process. Just today, in the forum, we had a kind of very interesting discussion about how hard it is to start actually public participation. Yes, it is hard, and it will not be easier, okay? Sorry about that. But the sooner you start, the better for you. And it's like with riding the bicycle. You have to collapse a couple of times, you have to scratch your knee, you have to scratch your head, and then after a couple of times you will learn how to make it. The same is with educating people, with making them partners for the decision-making process. Then we have environmental goals, which are associated with, again, infrastructure, heating systems, water supply systems, sewage collection systems, and all the kind of the things which actually are like that, or just with introducing of the new environmental corridors. And by the way, in many cases in our cities, we have some very good examples of that. And Chabarovsk is a very good example of having those former river valleys, which are right now the major green boulevards or parks. I don't know what exactly this is, but it looks absolutely fantastic. It provides kind of opportunity to have some green corridor within the city, which for many, many reasons is a kind of very good idea. And then we have to realize that urban regeneration is not only about planning and making designs. I mean, when I was in your shoes, when I was in your age, I was basically believing that making urban change is about making a drawing, okay? When I was at your age, I was still drafting by pen, you know, I mean everything. We didn't have computers yet at that time, okay? It was still before the computer era. AutoCAD was not invented at that time, okay? I know it may sound crazy, but actually we had times like that, okay? So we were drawing everything by hand. So we were actually believing in plans. We were believing that when we draw something, it is. There's nothing more wrong. A drawing is just a drawing. Then you have to make it happen. And we do not have any Prince Charming or Magic Wizard of Oz or whoever kind of magician is associated with the process who is going to touch it and say, let it happen, and it will happen. It will never happen like that. For implementation of these projects, you need organization structures, you need money, you need proper political climate, and a number of different things, which, again, you, as the future architects, you might be part of this game, but even if you are not part of this game, you just have to remember that people like politicians, developers, bankers are existing. Today in the forum, in the first panel, we had a very interesting case where actually the whole thing has been discussed by Mr. Sharonov, who is actually teaching in the School of Management, by Vice President of the Bank of Moscow, and by the person associated with the private sector. There was no architect. What does it mean? That the city is being produced not necessarily in a form of architectural drawings, but that actually the architectural drawings is just the beginning of the whole game. And you have to remember about that that's actually how this process is organized. Doesn't matter whether this is Russia, Poland, United States, or any other country in the world. That's all around the globe how it actually happens. So you need organization, you need finances for that, You also need promotion, you need information, you need public dialogue, and you need a lot of different things which go far beyond the traditionally understood architectural workshop. So actually, when you plan for urban regeneration, this is not just architectural process. It's a very much multidisciplinary process when in many cases we are using the methodology of the so-called strategic planning. And there is some very, very interesting book newly published. I stole one of them, so I can show you how that looks like. So please don't tell our colleagues at Moscow Urban Forum that I have it, because I stole it from the room. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, but it's pretty fat. Okay, it looks very interesting. So if you want to know what the strategic urban plan is about, you have a perfect source in Russian. Okay? This copy is mine, okay? I stole it, but actually I guess you can get more from our colleagues from Moscow Urban Forum, okay? So what you need for that is you need, first of all, analysis of the site, which you are able to do. You need to make a drawing. So you have to make a drawing of how it's gonna look like, but then on this basis you have to determine what kind of actions and activities have to be undertaken. And finally, you have to decide how to implement it, how to make it in reality. So when you make this fantastic model of urban transformation of the certain site, this is Hafen City in Hamburg, one of the best planned urban projects in the world at the moment, and one of the best implemented urban projects in the world. If you do not have a chance to go to Hamburg, which is, by the way, very much advisable, and I would strongly recommend you to go and see this project, to see the model, to see everything which is associated with that, to go around the site. It's like 150 hectares of the ongoing urban transformation process. You can actually visit the website of the Hafen City project, and you can find all the information, possibly also in Russian, because they are very international. So you can actually probably get it over there. So you actually make this kind of comprehensive analysis of the site. I will not discuss in detail what those things are about, but then you have to define those specific actions. So you have to make a vision for the site, so you have to make your architectural and urban vision, but on this basis you have to know what kind of specific actions you have to determine, and finally how to implement everything. So actually what kind of specific projects have to be defined, what kind of partners you have to identify, what kind of money you have to identify for that, and finally, how you are gonna implement and monitor everything. And in order to guarantee the success of a project like this, when you saw this model a couple of slides ago, actually, again, it doesn't get implemented, this project, like with a touch of the magic stick. It has to be subdivided into a number of the individual projects, and each of them has its own budget, plan, funding, and everything which is associated with those things. And in some cases, these projects are associated with much wider area than just your regeneration site. Like in example, if you are dealing with this, let's say, former harbor area on the banks of Amur, here in Khabarovsk, so you might realize that you need a new road leading to there, and this new road has to be constructed from the other end of the city. So actually, to make this site function properly, you have to make the new road which is going far beyond the borders of your site, okay? So again, when you are dealing with a site like this is the plan for the renovation of the Eastern Docks in Amsterdam. Again, completed, developed, you can go there and see how it looks like. You have a number of the projects, including very interesting pieces of architecture, like in example this thing, which is the most well-known part of architecture from the whole thing. But this is also associated with a number of the infrastructure projects which go far beyond the borders of this development. So actually we have a number of the actors which are associated with that. So we have the site owner, we have the investor, and the investor can be the private partner. It usually is the private partner. The site owner can be, again, the private partner, or it can be the municipality. Then we have the local community. It means people who are living there or right next door. And then we have some professional practice. It means we have some people who are associated with deciding about that, how that looks like. Here in Russia, this professional practice is especially strong. You have very strong union of architects, you have very strong people sitting in the planning commission within the municipalities. So you have very, very strong professional practice. It's very well developed. It's not necessarily the case in other countries. So you all should be happy that actually in Russia it is organized like that. And then, depending on the situation, you have to choose the whom you are talking to. Here we have a falling apart wooden house in Irkutsk. I took the picture last winter, I guess. As you can see, this place looks a little bit rusty, so to speak, right? So who could be interested in doing that? Can we identify some big developer from New York interested in investing in this little house? With the whole respect to Irkutsk and this little house, I don't think so, okay? So private sector, not necessarily. So who could be interested? Well, it turned out that there are a couple of families living there, and they are partners. They have some money, they are interested, they don't want to move out, and they are interested in actually improving the situation because they want to keep their home, okay? So it's not about pushing everybody away and just investing huge amount of money into the whole thing. In many cases, it's not possible. But in this case, you have different partners which you have to take into account. Again, you have various situations. You have various types of urban structures, you have empty sites, you have allotment gardens, you have some rundown buildings, you have some microrayon type of developments. There is a whole mixture of different things which is associated with that. And in many cases, the public sector wants to push the problem out. They just want to sell the land and say, okay, we are done with this. This is the case from Gdańsk, where actually, from my home city, where the city has actually sold this piece of land, which is actually in the middle of the microrayon type of development. And the developer actually decided to build a set of skyscrapers around the central area, which was called the future central park of the district, okay? With the whole respect to this crazy idea of having a central park surrounded by this amount of skyscrapers, actually what is interesting is that this is a perfect example of shifting the problem to the developers. The city didn't want to deal with this issue, so they just sold the land and said, okay, we are done, do whatever you want, okay? It happens. And in here we have mayor, we have city planning administration, which can be stronger or weaker depending on the city. We have city council. We might have regional government. Here in Russia, it is very strong part of the government. And also, we might have central government, which normally doesn't have much to do with cities. But again, here in Russia, this is very much important. So to speak, we have many federal projects which are happening here and there, right? And actually, public sector is willing to get a better city image, to have the situation improved, because they want to be good to the people in many cases. Actually, to make development happen as ordered or as requested, to provide proper coordination, and the best actually is to shift the problem into somebody else's hands. So then we have the community, so we have the people, okay? We often forget that we have the community, and this is very important. And community is not just individual people, but it's a group of people. And this group of people has its representative. As you can see, sometimes can be very attractive representative, okay? But also, those group of people can represent different interests. If we, in example, subdivide the room here into 5 parts, living in different parts of the city, like our colleagues here, part A, our colleagues over there, part B, our colleagues surfing on the internet and checking your emails on your iPhones over there, part 3, then part 4, and then those guys talking over there, part 5. It might actually end up that you are in conflict, okay? not because this guy is still surfing on his iPhone, okay? Hello, I'm talking to you, hello? Still surfing. Here we are, hello. Good, thank you, okay? Okay. Now, he is the victim right now, okay? You see, this is a trick, okay? The fact is that if you represent certain city, if you still don't know what I mean, right? Okay, he still doesn't know. That's good. Okay, so we have a good victim today. It's a good sociological trick about lecturing, by the way, is to find a victim. I found one right now, so I have somebody to deal with. Okay. Anyway, let's continue. The thing is that if we actually represent different parts of the cities, we might end up with the situation that actually every group has different interests, okay? So if you look at a certain site, the ladies might say, oh, we want a nice park over there. Those ladies and gentlemen over there might say, we don't want a park, we want a new housing area. Those guys over there who are already not surfing the iPhone might say, oh, we want a place to make sports, in example. Those people here in front might say, no, we want to make a new shopping center. And then those guys over there say, I don't care what you do, just do some fun, okay? It might mean actually that you are a little bit in conflict, okay? Because those guys over there, because they are so far away, they will have to drive, so they need a parking lot. And those ladies who want to have a park, they don't want a parking lot. So we have a basic conflict, okay, between the different groups of people. And it happens on a daily basis in our cities, okay? Not only between the private sector and the people, but also between the groups of people. So we have the community. And when we deal with the urban regeneration projects, we have people who want to leave. They just want to go somewhere else, just let me get some better place to live. Then we have people who want to stay. And then you have to provide them with an opportunity to stay on a longer basis in certain area. Then they can form the community, and they should be accepted as the actor. And the idea is actually that they want to have improved their living conditions, as well as to recognize existing qualities of the site. When you talk to the people about some area, what is interesting about that? And you are assuming that there is nothing interesting. And suddenly somebody says, oh, you know, there is this little bench which I constructed 20 years ago. I like this bench. You know, maybe it would be good to paint it, but I like it. I want it to be kept over there because I'm sitting there every summer for half of the year, okay? And suddenly you realize that some little piece of street furniture which seem to be completely lousy, unimportant, and unattractive, could be actually extremely attractive and extremely important for some person and some member of the community, okay? Which we do not recognize frequently, okay? So, what are the goals and strategies of the community? First of all, they need to have a representative. They need to have a leader. Because when you have a group like this, when Vera Ivanovna was trying to find out whether we should have the lecture in English and Russian, everybody started to talk, okay? What does it mean? You guys need to get organized, okay? You need a leader of this group, of that group, of that group, and then we will have a proper representation who will be able to negotiate with Vera Ivanovna whether we should have this lecture in English or in Russian. But we already took a democratic unilateral decision. This is going to be in English, okay? So we made our democratic process. Secondly, we have to make our community visible and important. Thirdly, we have to raise the self-consciousness of the community. In many cases, our communities are afraid that they don't know their rights, they don't know they are important, and they are just pushed out from certain sites. So, in the end, their goal and strategy of the people is to participate as a partner in some key city development projects, because they are partners and they have to learn how to become a partner. And again, today during the forum we were discussing with some colleagues from different political parties about how to get involved in these things. Well, it's not easy job, it's not easy task to become a partner, but again, you have to try, okay? You have to learn how to ride a bicycle to ride a bicycle. So you will never become a partner of the city unless you learn how to become a partner and how to represent. And in the end, the idea is that actually you are becoming an active partner in all possible initiatives. Then we have investors, I mean the private sector. And we have to realize that those investors prefer to talk separately to the community. So if I'm the investor, I come to our colleagues here and say, listen, I will build you this little park, twice smaller, but you will get it, okay? And you just give me the rest of the land and I will build, you know, the new area here, okay? And then we have the municipality. So let's imagine that our colleagues from the organization community, you are the representatives of Mr. Mayor or Madam Mayor or whoever is the mayor of the city. And actually I can tell you, let's make some business, okay? But I don't want you to talk to you, okay? Because then my business is in danger, okay? So again, this is the point of view of the investor. So we have big development, but also big construction companies. And here in Russia, we have big construction companies. We have small local companies, but we also have individual persons who can invest, as well as some current land and house owners. And again, we have certain goals and strategies. We want to have redeveloped a business to grow with positive image. We want to encourage more participation, of course, participation of the private sector by simplifying the rules. We want to have quick return on investment, which is very important. And we want to promote better quality, not because we want to have, as the private sector, because we want to be that good for the community, but because better quality means more money, okay? Simply speaking. As simple as that. And finally, we have professionals, I mean people who know how to make drawings, okay? So who are the actors? Individual architects and planners. In Gdańsk, in my city, we have a colleague who is probably 100 years old already. The guy is moving using 2 walking sticks, but he is participating in every meeting. And he is always standing out, taking his walking sticks and saying, you, Mr. Mayor, are stupid because I know better, okay? And you know what? He doesn't know better, but he always persuades that he is right, okay? So he's very influential, okay? So we have individual architects and planners. Then we have some professional associations. We have some unions of architects, guilds of planners, and all the other things. Then we have City Planning Commission, which is a very important partner in the whole thing. Then we have municipal services like municipal planners, City Development Policy Committee, as well as private planning and design companies, which are also important in this process. And they also have their interests. You are future architects, so what do you want? You want commission, okay? You want to make money on your design work. And it's natural, there's nothing to be ashamed of, okay? This is your idea, okay? On the other hand, you actually want to really promote best professional practice. You want to be proud of your work, okay? You want your city to look nicer, okay? This is very important driving force, okay? This old guy, which I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, he's not making any design anymore. He's just committed to make cities as good as possible. And then you want to get involved and included in all aspects of the proposed development. And in the end, the best strategy is to introduce some innovative planning instruments like competitions, public participation, and this kind of the things which are associated with that. How to deal with those things? Again, this is Irkutsk, the new urban quarter. I don't remember the name, sorry about that, but I guess you know what I'm talking about, just built from scratch a couple of years ago. First of all, you have to make a proper design. So again, architecture matters successfully, okay? Architecture matters. But on the other hand, you have to provide a proper community outreach. So basically speaking, you have to know who is your partner in terms of community. Then you have to make a kind of comprehensive plan. We have to provide all the components of the project. You have to provide a kind of dialogue in the whole process, just to make sure that when the building process starts, there are no surprises. Okay? And finally, we have implementation. We have coordination. We have some external agencies like those building companies who are just coming and doing different things. And we have public relations. Okay? And there are some projects which are a nightmare from the public relations point of view. You might have heard about the project in Germany called Stuttgart 21. It's a big railway project, okay? They are just basically putting the whole huge train station underground, okay? And in general, it's fantastic, okay? Let's make open park and open space on the surface and everything will be underground. You cannot imagine a project which was worse publicized, and there is so much of the public disagreement for this project, nobody knows why, that you would never ever understand why it's actually happening. If you want to find out more about this, Google out Stuttgart 21 and you will find probably many of materials about that. So then you have to stage the project. It's never coming in one piece. It's always coming part after part. There are some things which have to be made before, then there are some things which have to be made after. And finally, you have to involve all actors in the process to make it happen. And for doing that, you need comprehensive approach. Although the intervention may vary, it may be just one building in some distressed area, it may be one urban block, it may be one plot, it may be one urban quarter, it may be one whole city district, or it may be half of the district. In every case, you need this kind of comprehensive approach. So that means it needs multidisciplinary planning, and then it needs complex development process. And in some cases, so-called large-scale interventions are actually included, which we'll discuss a little bit in a few minutes. So we actually need to reform our approach, our planning workshop. This kind of traditional planning workshop is focused on design. So you basically believe that once you make a design, it is ready. So professional and political discussions are on the top. There is nobody speaking about the money, to the socio-economic reality, and actually you are just fulfilling this design task. In Russian it is called techniczna zadача. You just have it ready, you have made it, and that's it, okay? But it's just the beginning, okay? It's just the beginning, and in many cases you have to really understand what the project is about, because maybe if somebody is telling you that you have to make this, in the end you have to realize that you have to make something completely different to make the site being regenerated in a proper way. So in this traditional planning workshop, you are actually making the ready design. This is not a ready design, but it takes a form of a book, booklet, whatever. You just sell it, okay? You sell the ready design, okay? So you sell drawing like this, okay? Which, of course, it's the image from the seaside in US, but basically it's a kind of the plan which tells you how the whole thing is gonna look like. But actually what we need to reinvent is a kind of strategic planning approach which focuses on the design process, and it's not obsessed with best possible design solution. In some cases, to have a bit worse design, but the one which is agreed upon by everybody is better solution than the perfect design that nobody wants, okay? Secondly, it has to be based on the interdisciplinary and participatory approach, and it should allow various detailed solutions within the agreed development scheme. So you could actually have this being made in a form of this kind of flexible design, either for the city square. This is for the city of Płock in Poland. One of the city squares over there was redesigned in this kind of participatory way. As you can see, there is not much architecture here yet, okay? Or the whole city district of Gdańsk city center. I was involved in both projects as the moderator of the urban regeneration workshops. But sometimes you have kind of hybrid examples which actually involves strategic approach, but there is not so much community involvement because there is no community over there. It is focused on quality of urban space as the prerequisite of the good city. And also the important issue is selecting investors and partners. Again, the Hafen city in Hamburg, the one which we discussed a little bit before, is a perfect example because this is the place which used to be the former harbor. There was nobody living there. So who is the stakeholder? Who is the community here? Well, there is a community, but nobody living here. The whole community of the city of Hamburg, 2 million people, they are interested in this project because this is the future center of their city. So in the case of the waterfront of the city of Khabarovsk, where there is nobody living there, but everybody is interested in this space, everybody wants to have this space as good as possible, again, we have the whole city which is interested in this project. And in some cases, we might get, as I mentioned a little bit before, this kind of large-scale urban interventions, which are associated with complex redevelopment programs, associated with introduction of new, substantial portions of urban program, in some cases with new transportation infrastructure, which are planned and implemented in an integrated way by one clearly defined entity. And again, here the best example is Hafen City, because you have the new metro line here. You have got the, I guess, 1 million square meters of the new floor area. You have, I don't know how many apartment blocks, how many public buildings. There is a new university, a new symphony hall, and many, many, many different things, as well as many private office buildings and all the other things. And in order to implement it, again, you have to identify those specific projects which can have different types, sizes, locations, might be associated with different implementation problems, and they depend on a number of different things. What is the type of land ownership? There might be some kind of problem associated with that. What kind of financing is available for that? What kind of investor or developer will be associated with that? And what is the political or legal situation associated with this? And here you have the case of Gdynia. All these shining gray things, actually these are the new urban projects which are being planned for the city. As you can see, very different types, very different shapes, very different sizes, no architecture defined yet in many cases. And actually what you got here is you got a collection of the whole variety of different projects. Each of them demands different implementation model, but then when they are put together like Lego toys or like puzzle or like pieces of the puzzle, they form the city. But only if they are carefully planned and if they fit each other, if they match each other, and if they, so to speak, don't quarrel with each other, okay? Which sometimes it happens. And as I said, in many cases, it is actually, the whole problem is not about making a design, but the problem is to make the implementation process happen. And that actually means that this project may deal again with the particular site, but in some cases they may deal with the projects of the much bigger size. So in order to actually implement those projects, you have to define the specific actions that have to be undertaken. You have to choose proper implementation instruments, to choose proper financing scheme, and you have to provide certain level of involvement of the public and private sectors. Now the trick is that those urban regeneration programs are usually very costly. They are not as cheap as building new blocks of flats somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So that's why in many cases you have to combine a number of different sources of funding, including some public grants, including some money from the municipality, including some cooperation from the regional government, from the central government. I'm not entirely sure how it works here in Russia in terms of public aid, so to speak, but in other European countries it is somehow regulated that in some cases it is possible to provide certain type of assistance. And actually one can define different models that can be employed in different situations. And these models actually depend on the level of the public sector involvement in the implementation of the particular project, as well as on the level of the effectiveness. And actually we have 4 models. First of all, direct financing, which basically means that the public sector pays for the project, okay? So it is the municipal project, regional project, or federal project, and it is being run. When you have public-private partnership, it means that the municipality is providing land and the developer is providing money and know-how how to deal with this land. Or other vice versa, which happens also from time to time. In any case, we get a project done by 2 or 3 or more partners. Then we may get so-called zones of special regulation, like a special economic zone. We are close to China. In China, they are good in making the special economic zones, as you know. And actually having those special economic zones within them, it's so much cheaper to make business, it's so much easier to develop anything, that actually everybody goes there with their money, okay? And finally, you might get something called the professional assistance programs. And these professional assistance programs can be aimed at those people living in those rundown individual homes or the small apartment blocks, and the municipality can say, hey, if you colleagues improve your building, we may help you. We may pay like 20% of your costs. And it happens. In case of the city of Sopot, which is right next door from my hometown, the majority of the buildings were renovated within this kind of scheme. So this is actually possible, this is actually doable. And so you have those different professional assistance programs actually, which can also provide some kind of technical aid to the people. There is a long story about how to make it. I guess it's a subject for the separate lectures with examples. But in the end, you have to make your choice. But actually, in order to make a choice of the particular model of intervention, you have to know what kind of results do you want to achieve, which means does it need to be implemented in a kind of very limited amount of time or not? And secondly, what kind of resources do you have? What kind of money, power, legal framework, and so on? What kind of things are available? And there is a lot of extra questions which you have to ask yourself in order to understand what kind of things actually can be taken into account. So, on top of it, we suddenly can realize that we started our lecture with saying that architectural design and urban design is not so important. Well, it is a part of the whole game. And now I would like to argue that it is important, and it actually plays the crucial role in the whole thing, because it actually designs about uniqueness of the place. As you could see, I have just demonstrated 4 implementation models of the projects, for thousands of projects, just 4 implementation models. And the trick is that actually these models are universal, but your design is unique. It should be unique. It should always be tailored to the particular site, to the particular situation. So urban design, urban planning actually allows understanding what the development is to be about in the given area, how community, private actors, public actors can be involved in the process, and also how to make the site attractive for everybody interested in that thing. Again, you have some examples of the urban design, which actually, this one is a project for the South Miami in the US, which is a kind of good example of the outcome of the discussion of how to make this site attractive. And of course, you may have a lot of different case studies, you may have a lot of different examples of various sizes and different types of urban degradation. But in every case, the design proposal is so-called tailor-made, and each of these projects is sunk in a certain socioeconomic context. So you actually might have individual buildings, individual post-industrial buildings being redeveloped. This case is the former factory in Gelsenkirchen, which was transformed into the kind of entertainment center. So you have all the discos, nightclubs, and whatever you might imagine is there, basically speaking. So you don't have to walk on a distance. Everything is basically in one place. Secondly, you can actually use the part of the former factory as the new infrastructure for your thing. You will be surprised, but basically this actually is a parking lot which is beautifully restored inside and as a shell is serving the former industrial hall. Then you have the very famous High Line project in New York, which is associated with reusing of the former railway line and converting it into a new public space. Something which we might not imagine doable, but this is the most attractive public space in the entire Manhattan at the moment. Okay? That's how it looks like. It's flooded with people. It actually generated so much development around that the entire panorama of the lower Manhattan is right now different than it used to be a couple of years ago. But also, some projects may not necessarily be successful, like this Central Artery project in Boston. They put the whole former highway underground. So actually underground, this beautiful lawn, you have the whole highway. But the problem is that the site is not really used and the site is not really developed and basically nobody knows what to do with this. So they have invested like $8 billion into this project and they ended up with something like this. I don't think whether this is the best investment ever, but that's not my money successfully. And then you might have a kind of projects like this, which look a little bit like Star Wars type of development, which is in Melbourne, Australia. As you can see, this is a kind of new public square and a set of the public buildings sitting over the railway tracks, which are a little bit lower. So building a certain shell on top of it, they have constructed this thing. And again, we are coming back to Sopot, Poland, with this successful transformation of the city center. So on this basis, we can actually make some conclusions regarding the key urban design and architectural design principles for the compact cities and for urban regeneration. First of all, you do not search for the individual ego-driven form, but you are searching for the cityness. You are searching for the image of being part of the city, okay? You even search for a good nickname for this project, okay? Which you will market later on. If you look at all the developments which are being marketed at the moment, how they are called? City lights, harbor lights, metropolitan, townhouse of the West, whatever, okay? I mean, just from the top of my head. What does it mean? It means that all of them refer to the cityness, to the idea of living in the city and being in the city. And that also means high density, traditional urban quarters, high quality of living, okay? I was kind of surprised once in St. Petersburg. I was taken home by one of colleagues of mine. He actually bought with his family the new apartment. And when I mean, it looked brand luxurious from outside, but when I entered inside, I was kind of surprised that actually the standard is not so much different to those buildings which were developed in the 70s and 80s, okay? Is it a high quality of living? I'm not so convinced, especially that I think they paid really a lot of money for this apartment with a very nice Basilievska Island view and whatever it was, okay? Secondly, this is about architectural diversity of urban structure. You cannot plan a kind of monotonous structures because nobody is gonna believe in the attractiveness of that, okay? You have to be ready to find your way home, even if you are not in the best shape, so to speak, and also if actually you have to have a feeling that your building, your part is unique. Thirdly, you have to differentiate urban density of various parts of urban structures. You have to mix types of land uses and buildings. You have to avoid dullness of the whole thing. And finally, you have to develop the public spaces, and you have to provide a kind of specialization of those. So you are actually providing a kind of traditional type of city, which has clearly defined central part, clearly defined structure, clearly defined image of the cityness. I don't say that you should copy-paste this drawing. It's not the idea. It's just the example. But actually, this is what decides about the attractiveness of the city these days. And conclusions. Urban regeneration. As you can see, it's not just fanaberia of somebody. It's a part of the contemporary planning workshop. And if you want to be successful in planning, if you want to do your professional business in the best possible way, you have to know what the whole thing is about. Secondly, this is a multidisciplinary issue. That means that you will have to cooperate with this with your colleagues from the civil engineering faculty, from the management faculty, from the faculty of banking, from the law faculty, and I don't know which ones, but many more, I guess, right? So it involves a number of the different issues. Thirdly, it requires comprehensive approach. That means that you have to combine all of those things. And finally, as the cherry on the top of the cake, it can really increase the city attractiveness, and it can make the city successful, and it can make you famous, which, with the sincere wishes of making you famous to our colleague surfing on his iPhone or whatever the brand of the cell phone was, I would like to conclude this lecture. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, профессор Лоренц. Ну что, уважаемые, вопросы? Мне кажется, ну так, мы вас, по-моему, неплохо учим рисовать архитектуру. Но я надеюсь, что сегодня вы поняли, что только рисовать – это очень мало. Я с этим полностью согласна, с тем, что говорил профессор Лоренц. Вот. Ну, вы, в общем-то, уже довольно приучены, вы слушаете каждый год лекции зарубежных профессоров, но в основном вы слушаете профессоров из Японии и Кореи. Ну вот, а теперь другой подход. Прошу, кто? Наталья Николаевна, не отвлекайте Александра. Кто хочет чего-нибудь спросить? Гроза все равно на улице, давайте лучше поговорим. Ну.
You can speak Russian, don't worry.
Да, можно по-русски задавать. Прошу.
Я хотела спросить, вот у нас в Хабаровске очень много проблем с зонами промышленными, которые сейчас только начинают реконструироваться, только начинают власти заниматься проблемой реновации. Вот как, вы, я так понимаю, давно занимаетесь этой темой, как власти уже сейчас взаимодействуют с вами, вот как эта работа уже практически действует, насколько это успешно? Есть ли у вас примеры? Не касаемо Hafen City, там других стран, именно конкретно ваша работа, как она все-таки практически может реализовываться?
Well, thank you very much for your question. We have to realize that when we have the post-industrial site, or still the working industrial site, in many cases it is restructured, okay? The industry gets restructured. It might mean that we actually have a site of 100 hectares, and we don't need any more of those 100 hectares, okay? It might end up we need only 30 hectares, or that the structure of the site is that complicated that the company which is going there, which is running there, they say, oh, we actually want to move out to the new industrial zone of the city because we want to construct the new factory over there and then sell the old land, okay? And that happens quite frequently, okay? nobody is killing those factories, so to speak, right? I mean, nobody is actually making them bankrupt just to get the land. It doesn't happen. What happens is actually that if the factory really realizes that it's a better business to move out somewhere, then the land is getting available. And then either they talk to the municipality, or the municipality is already ready for this process, and it has ready plans for that because it was foreseen in some planning processes. But frequently it was not foreseen. And then they have to go to the municipality and say, okay, we have this problem, we would like to sell this land, could you please zone it as the housing, services, or commercial uses, or whatever. And then they start negotiating, discussing, and so on. Depending on the scale of the alternation, it might take longer or shorter time. It may be more or less effective. But usually, when there is a kind of site owner which wants really to move out, then the municipality usually is trying to accommodate to his needs. But there are some cases when the municipality says, I'm sorry, but we have our own plans about this land, and you cannot do whatever you want with this site. And of course, there are many people involved. There are planners and architects involved as consultants on both sides. They can provide some plans, ideas, sketches, also showing not only the final design, but in example, the potential of the site. In example, I was cooperating with one of the developers who was preparing the development of the certain site. And our task was basically to assess how many square meters can be made over there, what has to happen in order to make more of those square meters without violating the legal rules which were included in the legal plan for the site. And it's a part of our profession. We are working on both sides, okay? Both on the municipality and on the private sector. Okay? More questions?
Спасибо. Вопросы? Ну, тогда для разгонки. У меня один вопрос.
Пожалуйста.
Профессор Лоренс, вот у меня вопрос чисто преподавательский. Скажите, пожалуйста, какие практики есть у ваших студентов во время обучения и как долго они длятся?
Well, they have, first of all, they have the so-called urban planning practice, или урбанистическая практика.
А где они их проходят?
There are two types of them. I mean, first of all, after the second or third year, as far as I remember, this is being organized by our colleagues in a form of a kind of city survey. So they have to complete a certain part of the survey task on their own under the supervision of our colleagues. And then we have the agreements with the municipal and private planning offices. And then before they actually complete their diploma, they have to go there and work for a month, for 2 months. I don't know how long does it take, but there are something like that. And they have to actually have so-called professional practice before they actually enter the diploma semester, okay? Before they complete that. Besides that, they also have, as far as I know, the architectural history practical training, so to speak, which is basically measuring some old building. I remember I was measuring some old piece of some cathedral, and I almost got killed by some stone falling on my head. It was that old, actually. So it happened like that. And also they have the practical training on the building site. So they basically have to stay for some time at the building site just to recognize how the foundation look like and what makes it different in practice, one type of foundation of the building from the other type of the foundation of the building. So that's basically the scope of practical training, as far as I remember.
Thank you. И вот вслед этому вопросу, выполняете ли вы со своими студентами какие-то заказы для каких-либо организаций?
Да?
Ну, похоже, все похоже.
Okay, I mean, I can say that we have been both doing a kind of professional assignments. So the municipality just invite us to be part of some project. And just recently, we have been doing with our students some kind of so-called community building projects. It was called Quo Vadis Gdańsku. If you want, I can give you some more information about that. The idea was actually to develop a kind of micro-strategies for the 4 selected districts. It was financed by the external money granted to these communities. So basically it was a kind of external grant, okay? Municipality didn't add any single ruble, zloty, dollar, euro, or whatever is the currency to this project. And the students were supposed to take part in the whole thing within their classes. Okay, so this was part of the teaching program.
Спасибо, да, очень похоже. Вопросы появились, нет? Устали, что ли?
Everybody is shy, hungry, and wants to go home, right?
Ну что, тогда, наверное, будем завершать. Я думаю, что я выражу общую точку зрения, что это было очень интересно, и нам надо продолжать подобные встречи. Как вы считаете, уважаемые? Правильно? Правильно, да? Надо, полезно, правда? Полезно. Даже тем, кто плохо знает английский. За одним для тех, кто плохо
Vera
знает.
Ivanovna, I can only add one thing, because when I'm speaking about those issues to our architecture students, suddenly some of them started to cry. And I asked, why are you crying? Okay? And one girl which actually started crying, she said, you know, because I was so romantic about the architecture profession, and now I see the reality. And I said, you know, the sooner, the better.
Ну, вот наш человек, понимаете, архитектор, градостроитель.
Большое вам спасибо за ваше внимание.
И вам большое спасибо, профессор Лоренц.